Will democracy survive in the next couple of years?
And essentially, we are the same.
And there are so many needs that Minnesota has.
What people are saying they need right now.
Access to democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center in Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Firefly Credit Union, with locations throughout the Twin Cities, has proudly served Minnesotans since 1925. Firefly guides its members forward by delivering customized financial solutions to improve their lives in all aspects of banking. Firefly Credit Union, they light the way with life illuminated. Edina Eye, Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years. Now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services but dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Hello and welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker. I'm the guest host for today's program. And we're excited and happy to welcome Susan Brower, who's the demographer for the state of Minnesota. Hello, Susan. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. There are basically 3 areas that we'd like to discuss with you today, Susan. One is what's your role here in the state and the responsibilities that your department has. And secondly, we'd like an update on the 2020 census. And then the third topic would be a discussion around the current population trends in the state of Minnesota. So before we get into those topics, let's learn a little bit more about Susan. As we mentioned, she is the state demographer for Minnesota, and she directs the state's Department of Demographic Center. That's a role that you've been in since February of 2012. Prior to that, you worked at the Demographic Center for the Compass Project at the Wilder Research in St. Paul. And before that, you worked at the Population Studies Center at the University of Michigan. You also hold a master's degree in public policy from the Humphrey School of Public Affairs in the University of Minnesota. And you have your PhD in sociology at the University of Michigan, specializing in demography and family sociology. So a lot of experience, a lot of good background for the role that you have. So let's start out by having you tell us about the role of the demographer here in Minnesota.
Sure. So we're a small office in state government. Depending on the time of the decade, there's anywhere between 4 and 7 of us in our office. And our job is to make sure that Minnesota has good data about the population of Minnesota, about the people who live here, about the number of people who are here now, and the number of people who we think will be here in the future. So typically throughout a decade, we busy ourselves with making population estimates for every city and township in Minnesota outside the 7-county metro. The Metropolitan Council does the estimates inside that 7-county area. We make population projections for counties, and we publish them to help people kind of plan for what's coming. We also look generally at population trends, how the state is changing, how it is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse, how it is aging, basic social, economic, demographic types of things we track just so that our state leaders have the data that they need to make good decisions. But anytime a census rolls around, we get very involved in making sure that the census here in Minnesota is done as well as it possibly can be done. And so that's what I've been busy with for the last few years.
I'm sure. What are some of the departments within the state or organizations within the state that rely on the research that you do and the data that you provide, and how do they use that?
Yeah, so there's so many different ways that the data gets used. We do analyses for the Department of Employment and Economic Development, for example, to show what the current composition of the workforce is like, and to give people a sense of what the workforce will look like in the future, both its size, will we have enough workers, are kind of the questions that we look at, and are they trained for the jobs that we have? Those kinds of questions we investigate for agencies like DEED and for private employers who want to know the same answer. We also do work for the Department of Education, so they have a sense of what the child population in Minnesota looks like, what their circumstances are with respect to socioeconomic status, their linguistic abilities at home, their cultural makeup and racial makeup. And then we do lots of things for the Department of Human Services. They rely on our age projections to plan for what it means to have an aging state population as the baby boomers move into their older years. So those are just a few examples, but it's really a new thing every day that we're working on, trying to answer questions for policymakers so that they have good data to work from.
Well, in addition to the state agencies, the government agencies here, relying on the work that you do, is it possible that a company like Target or Thomson Reuters or Medtronic could call on you to get information that they would use in some of their planning and their work?
Yes, I'll say a couple answers to that. The first is that we, both the corporations and our office, relies on data that are collected by the Census Bureau, because that's the huge agency that is responsible for providing all of us with good data about the population. Corporations typically purchase that in a way that is packaged for their needs through a third-party vendor, rather than taking it directly from us or directly from the Census Bureau. But typically my interactions with, say, Best Buy and Thomson Reuters is to provide information, presentations, and written reports that are available to everyone. It's not just to those folks, but about what I see in terms of workforce. So it's more of the analysis and my kind of expert opinion on what I see in the data that we've interacted with in the past.
So that's kind of the value add that you provided to put some context around the data that you have.
We've got my kitty visiting us.
Hello, Kitty.
We're all working at home, of course.
Well, you've made a couple of mentions about the census. So let's transition into that topic and talk about that. It's been the 2020 census has been underway now for a while. What's the status here in Minnesota and nationally in terms of getting the count accomplished?
So we're at a point right now where there's been this prolonged period where people have had the opportunity to respond themselves. And just about a week and a half ago, census takers started going out in the field to knock on the doors of people who had not responded to the census. So where we are right now is we have a very good self-response rate. Lots and lots of Minnesotans have responded to the census so far. We're at 73% of the state has responded on their own, but that still leaves us a ways to go, and that's what we hope to make up with the census takers now going into the field.
So how much time's left for the census to be completed?
Well, you would think that would be just an easy, straightforward question, right? However, with a number of different things, including the coronavirus, the deadlines have shifted later into October. And then just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we learned that they were actually going to be shifted back to the end of September. So it feels a little bit like a mad rush to get that additional, 25% counted. Again, it's the Census Bureau that's doing that, but we're doing whatever we can here in the state to make sure that's easy for them to do.
This is the first time, the census is done every 10 years, and this is the first time that we've used the tool of online enrollment in the census. So how has that worked out? Has that been accepted and is being successful?
Yeah, so it really has the system of being able to respond online has been very successful. Most of the responses in Minnesota have come in online, over and above through the mail or through, you can also dial a 1-800 number and give your response that way. And it's been really an easy way for people to directly respond. Especially given the fact that people don't want to leave their home for, a postage stamp. Most people
Right.
don't want people coming to their doors at this point. And so really the response online is the way to go to make sure that both the census takers and we're safe from the virus.
Well, it makes a lot of sense in the current environment to be able to do it that way. I know we, in our household, we did it online, and it just takes a minute or two. It's really
Yeah.
very quick. Some people have expressed some concern about the information that may be asked in the questionnaire. How private is it, and how is that data used and protected? Can you give us some guidance on that?
Sure. So I understand that sentiment, absolutely. People are right to be protective of their data. The Census Bureau has special laws in place to protect the data that goes into the Census Bureau, and they are stricter laws than any other agency, federal or state agency, has in terms of data protection. Any data that's collected by the Census Bureau is kept in the Bureau for 72 years. I'm talking about individuals' names and addresses. This information is kept private for a full, almost a lifespan, 72 years. It was the average, it was the average life expectancy when the law was written. It's maybe a bit longer now, but that the data are only released at the level of, say, a neighborhood, at an aggregate level for statistical purposes, and not for anything about finding out about any individual.
Well, hopefully that makes people feel a little bit better about their willingness to share their information, because getting an accurate count of the population of not just Minnesota, but every state in the nation. But let's talk about how important it is for Minnesota to make sure we have every proper person accounted for. What does that mean to the state to do that?
Sure. So the census is used for so many things, it's really hard to overstate its importance. It's used first and foremost for apportioning seats of Congress in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so you may recall in 2010, after the last census, we just barely held on in Minnesota to our 8th congressional district. We did so just by about 8,000 people, which is a razor thin margin. I mean, that is a tiny number. We were the very last state to receive a seat in Congress. The data are also used when we go to make state legislative districts. And so if areas are undercounted, they will not get the full representation that is fair, that would be given to them if they had a full and complete count. So What is resting on the census in terms of political representation is just that this is how we realign our fair representation for the next 10 years. If we get a bad count, we have no way of making sure that everyone is equally represented in St. Paul or in Washington. There's all kinds of funding reasons too. So there's the political representation. There's also reasons for the purposes of funding that the census is used. More than 15 billion with a B dollars of federal funding are distributed to the state of Minnesota for all kinds of programs in education, healthcare, transportation, on and on and on, rural infrastructure. It's used for all kinds of purposes. And so, that's another reason why we need to make sure we count everyone, because it determines how much money Minnesota will have to spend on these things in the next decade.
$15 billion.
I know.
Yes.
Each year.
So the population, let's try to do some arithmetic here, Susan. The population of Minnesota right now is what, about 5.6 million.
Yep.
And if you divide that into 15 billion, each person is worth how much?
I won't pretend like I'm doing this in my head. I do know this number. It's about $2,700 per person per year that gets distributed on the basis of this census count. So a tremendous, if you think about one person counted for the next 10 years of funding, that's about $27,000 per person. So a lot of money is resting on this.
We've got to get every soul in Minnesota counted and enumerated properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, those are interesting statistics that are facts that you point out about how the census works and why it's so important to Minnesota. Another thing that I've heard some people concerned about is that there may be scams associated with the census taking.
Yeah.
Maybe you've heard of some of these, you are aware of some of them, and you might be able to speak to them about how to recognize them and to avoid them.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard of any, so we're well into the census taking period now, and I haven't heard of any major issues with that so far. That's not to say there haven't been little incidents here or there, but I haven't heard of any kind of widespread issue. But that doesn't mean that people shouldn't be watchful and shouldn't be concerned about this. Certainly, as census takers are going door to door, they should be sure that they are giving information to who they think they're giving it to census takers. And so there's a couple things that people can do to make sure that they have, that the census taker is who they say they are. They will have a ID card with them that says the U.S. Department of Commerce, which is part of what the Census Bureau is a part of. And then there's also a phone number that you can call to verify that that person who's at your door is indeed a census worker. And I can get that to you if you want to share it with folks afterwards.
No, that would be great, yes. And one of the reasons I asked that question is that I heard of an incident just this week.
Ooh.
Where someone said that they had completed the census questionnaire online some time ago, and just within the last couple of days, someone showed up at their door in person saying they were from the Census Bureau, and they were wondering, well, why would someone be calling on me in person if I had completed it online? So there's something that sounds a little scamish.
Yeah.
That, but then I heard someone else say that, well, sometimes they do follow-up calls or follow-up questionnaires. So is that true?
And I have heard about that happening, that is happening around the state now, that actual census takers are going to doors of households that have responded online. I don't know exactly where the breakdown in the system is, but I would encourage folks, if that happens to you, to resubmit it with that census taker after you verify their identity, just to make sure that they do indeed have your information.
So what are some things that the census either online or the census enumerator in person will not ask, like your social security number. Is that?
They will not ask your social. Absolutely not. The census is really basic information, basic demographic information. It asks who lives in your house, their birth dates, their ages, their race or ethnicity, whether you own or rent your home. Very basic stuff. It's a short form. And so it will not ask any information about income. It won't ask for your bank account. It won't ask for your social security number. And if you are getting questions like this, you should be a little bit suspicious and make sure that you have the form that is the census. I will add, though, that the Census Bureau does other ongoing work that does ask for income. It won't ask ever for bank account or social security, but it will ask for income because it wants to gather that information for some of the reasons we were talking about before.
Sure.
It wants, you know, when our state leaders want to know kind of the wage, the average wage of folks in a certain industry, that's the kind of information that they go to. So for the 2020 census, no income information is on there. No really sensitive information is on there. But for other surveys, you may get an income question or two.
Okay, that's good to know. And if someone is asking for a social security number as an example, as a part of the census survey, that's a red flag to say no and close the door.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And call the Census Bureau. Yeah, and let them know what's happening, or call our office and we'll let the Census Bureau know.
For sure. Yeah. Well, Susan, a great coverage for the census and understanding what it is and how it works. Anything else our viewers should know or would be interested in about this census process before we move on to talk about the demographic trends?
You know, I would just encourage folks, if they have people in their lives who they can reach out to and make sure that they filled out their form to do so. This has been a really tough census, and I really am concerned about how this will end, about the quality of this data, mostly because of the disruption of the pandemic right in the middle of this census. And so if you have college students in your lives, college students tend to be missed. If you have people who are young adults, young children in your lives, make sure that they're included on their parents' forms. It's a good thing to check with your neighbors and your friends and family and just make sure that your network of folks have done what they're supposed to do and filled out the census. That would help us a lot.
Well, I think you've explained why it's so important to us to make sure that we have the count correct and that we get it turned in on time. So that's great. Thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about the population trends here in Minnesota. You know, that's something you explained that you tracked earlier when you were talking about what your role is, but
yeah.
What's going on and what are you projecting over the next few years that's going to happen to the population and the workforce?
So generally, in terms of the population, just the big high-level picture, we expect that the state of Minnesota will continue to grow as it has in the past. It will grow at a slightly slower pace than in the past, and that is not because Minnesota has become any less of a lovely state to live or move to. It's just because as we have an older population, it's much harder to grow faster. So young populations grow faster. They're the ones who are parents and are having more kids. They're much less likely to be in high mortality age groups. So as we as a state become older, our growth slows down a bit. With respect to some of our age demographics, we have this huge generation of baby boomers who has begun for the last 10 years to turn age 65, so just moving into early retirement. But we have another 10 years of folks, people in their late 50s to early 60s who have not yet reached that kind of standard retirement age. And so we expect over time that we will have all kinds of changes because of this big age wave. The one that we began to feel first is a change in the labor force, growth. It began to slow down as baby boomers started retiring. We expect that it'll continue at least another 10 years as those baby boomers continue to age into those years. And then the group that's younger, the millennials and Gen Z moving into the workforce, is much smaller. And so we know, just looking at the number of people who are that age moving in, we will not have a lot of growth in our labor force for some time. And that will have implications for all kinds of things, from our economic growth to kind of what it means for higher ed, for their planning in terms of enrollment, what exactly higher ed needs to do to train the workers that we have. If we don't have a surplus of folks, what do we do with the people that we do have? So those are some of the things that we're just that are just in front of us that will be causing a lot. They've begun to cause a lot of changes, and they'll continue to do that.
You know, back in February, the Star Tribune had an op-ed page article that spoke to the migration out of the state of Minnesota, which I thought was rather interesting. But what's your take on who's migrating out and why?
So I'll just give you a tiny little history of where we're at in terms of that, because there's been a turnaround lately.
Okay.
We, for many years, for about 15 years, over the 2000s, we lost more people to other states than we gained. But more recently, in the last 2017, 2018, and maybe 2019, we actually have gained more people than we've lost. So that's a good thing in terms of our employment numbers, in terms of our labor force growth. The people who move tend to be young people. They tend to be people who are 18, 19, 20 years old. They are going away to college. They are going away for internships. They're moving away because they love the mountains and want to ski, or they're in love and they're following that person across the country. It's not older adults or kind of middle-aged adults that are leading those migration trends. It really is young people, and always has been young people that are the movers.
That's quite interesting. Really quite interesting. What, as we bring our program to a close here shortly, what are some of the bigger challenges that someone in your position, your role, encounters in their job?
Good question. You know, right now, the challenge that's in front of me, that has been squarely in front of me for 3 years, and I hate to go right back to it, but it really is the census, and it really is all of this that we've talked about today resting on it. You said, you know, for all we've talked about it, we could have filled it out 50 times over probably in the amount of time that we've been talking. It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's really tough. It's really tough in the current context to make sure that we have a full count. And so I just say that right now, that's the thing that is front and center, the biggest challenge ahead of me.
Well, I think it's it's understandable given the way you've explained the importance of it and how it works. And to come to a close, what do you enjoy about the job? I mean, being a demographer is really a unique, esoteric kind of career to have. What do you enjoy about it the most?
The thing that drew me to it first was just that I get to see invisible trends. I get to make them visible to folks. And so it's almost like a superpower that I have. I won't say it's mine. I'm just looking at data. But that's the thing that I liked about it from the beginning. That's the thing I still like today.
Well, thank you, Susan. Our guest has been Susan Brower, who's the state demographer for Minnesota. We appreciate your time and the information that you shared with us, Susan. Thank you very much, and we wish you success in getting the census done correctly and on time. So thank you very much.
So nice to talk to you. Thanks for having me.